You know what's weird? History keeps hyping the same philosophers again and again, and somehow Giambattista Vico barely gets mentioned. And that's honestly wild, because this man was not thinking small at all.
Giambattista Vico was born in 1668, in Naples, Italy. At the time, Naples was one of the largest and most culturally active cities in Europe. His birth in 1668 places him in a period when Europe was undergoing major changes, especially in philosophy and science. These changes would later influence his thinking. But before Giambattista Vico became the philosopher who thought on that kind of scale, life basically tried to uninstall him. He was a sickly child who nearly died after falling off a ladder, which is a wildly dramatic way to begin your origin story. He had barely even started life and the universe was already putting him through stress tests. And maybe that stayed with him, because Vico did not grow up obsessed with neat, comforting truths. Giambattista Vico was studying at the Jesuit school in Naples, run by the Society of Jesus. You know the kind of place, rigid rules, strict discipline, everything by the book. And one day, he just looked around. He took in the classroom, the way everyone was just repeating words they didn't actually understand, the way no one seemed to question anything, and he basically thought to himself, "This isn't for me." He stopped relying on teachers. He walked away from the Jesuit school. So what did he do? He went back to his father's bookshop. That was his real classroom. He read slowly. He would pick up a book, get curious about something the author mentioned, put it down, go find another book about that, and then come back. He would sit with ideas for days, weeks, and let them bounce around in his head. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. There was no grade, no deadline, just genuine curiosity. And honestly, that's when his real education started. He had access to this whole world of books, philosophy, history, poetry. It took time, years, probably, but he didn't care. He was too busy being fascinated by what he was learning to worry about whether he was doing it the right way. And here's the wild part. I mean genuinely wild. Years later, with no degree, no title, nothing that looked like success, the same system that couldn't teach him, the one that had no idea what to do with a mind like his, ended up hiring him as a professor. If you had never learned a single word, no language, no names, no voice in your head constantly explaining things to you, would you still think? It sounds like a simple question, but it isn't, because most people would immediately say no. They would say that without language, there is no thought, that the voice in your head is what thinking is, that without words, you're just aware, but empty. But that idea is so deeply learned that we don't even question it. Think about it carefully. Before you ever put something into words, before you explain it to yourself, something else happens first. You feel it. You sense it. You recognize something without knowing how you know it. You understand something before you can explain it. That moment, that silent, wordless recognition, that is thought in its earliest form. The voice comes later. We've just gotten so used to the voice that we mistake it for the whole process. But it isn't. If you had no language, you would still experience the world as meaningful. Not random, not chaotic, but full of patterns, signals, importance. You would still recognize danger. You would still notice rhythm. You would still feel curiosity, fear, attraction, awe. You would see the sky, not as an object called sky, but as something immense, something that presses on your awareness. You would hear thunder, not as a sound you can describe, but as something powerful, something that demands a response. You would stand in front of the ocean and feel its scale without needing a single word to tell you what it is. And then something crucial would happen. You wouldn't just experience these things, you would try to make sense of them. Not with definitions. Not with logic. But with imagination. You would begin to connect things. To form images. To create meaning where there is none given to you directly. The thunder wouldn't just be a sound, it would become something. A force. A presence. Maybe even something intentional. The sea wouldn't just be water, it would feel alive. The sky wouldn't just exist, it would demand a story. That act, that leap from sensation to meaning, is the beginning of human thought. And it didn't just stay there. It built everything. From those first attempts to understand the world came stories. From stories came shared beliefs. From shared beliefs came communities. From communities came rules, structures, language itself. And eventually, much later, came philosophy and science. So imagination is not some extra feature of the mind. It is the foundation. We did not begin as rational beings who later learned to imagine. We began as imaginative beings who slowly learned to reason. And even now, nothing has really changed. You still don't think in words first. You think in flashes, in images, in feelings that don't yet have names. When something confuses you, you don't immediately define it. You turn it around in your mind, you picture it, you compare it to something else. You reach for a metaphor because the literal explanation isn't enough. When something matters deeply to you, words often fail. Not because you don't understand it, but because what you understand is larger than language.